I'm Jeremy Hickerson, and this is All of Life. As protests fill the city streets and thousands of people march in the cause of Black Lives Matter, I want to make it clear that I'm on the side of those people. That I think it's important to emphasize Black Lives Matter. That if you say blue lives matter, all lives matter, buildings matter, it's an insult to what's behind the phrase Black Lives Matter, which is something that only needs to be said because it's clearly not true in our society. Well, the other things are true, and no one disputes them. After beginning with that, I want to speak a little bit about the likely outcome of some of these protests and something that I fear, and that is the use of coercion and intimidation to enforce a sort of woke, politically correct viewpoint, similar to what has gone on in some of our liberal arts universities with microaggressions and all that sort of language, with the idea that speech is as much violence as violence, that dissenting ideas will not be tolerated, with this sort of HR training that people will be forced to absorb and go along with, to try to a sort of re-education approach to solving our racial problem. And it is this, I think, where we go in the wrong direction, into a direction that is not helpful, not productive, probably counterproductive. And as proof of this, I'm going to offer up Stieg Larsson's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo trilogy, and I'll get to that a little bit later in the video. But let me talk a little bit about my personal history. I do believe that training is important, that consciousness raising has its place and is vital. I've experienced this myself. For instance, when I saw the movie Boys in the Hood in the 90s, I believe it was, that was an eye-opener for me about the things a teenager growing up Black in the LA area, I guess, would have to go through. There were two things I took away from that movie. The first was that here was a guy in an oppressed minority that had more nicer clothes than I did, had a nice car in high school when I was still riding the bus in college, and also had to live in fear of his life. This was the second thing. Everywhere he went in the neighborhoods around him because they were controlled by gangs. And so in a way, my eyes were opened in both ways. At least in the movies, there were Blacks that lived better than I did, with a working class father and a mother who did not bring home a paycheck. Dad had a lot of education but didn't get his college degree until I was in college. He worked in the photo darkroom at the Boeing Company in Seattle, a non-union situation, and we got by and did fine, but we didn't have, it's a lot of stuff we didn't have, and I didn't really miss it, to tell the truth. So it was in some ways an eye-opener that in this movie, anyway, this Black kid was doing quite a bit better than I was, but many of my friends were too. But also had to worry about dying on a daily basis, something that I never had to deal with, ever. Never had to think that way. That was important. It gave me a new understanding of what the situation was in the Black communities, or just in being Black anywhere. Another example, more recent, the other day at the university where I work, an email came out from the advisor for the Black Students Union. And I read it. It was a long email, and I read it more or less out of duty as a citizen, feeling the responsibility to hear this other citizen's pain, which I knew was real, and at the same time feeling that the point of the email was to punish me as a white person, to make me feel how I was involved in this pain. I did not read the whole email, I read most of it. Now, our society is certainly involved in that pain. And I am part of that society, and I am a part of that white society that brought Africans against their will as slaves and oppressed them for hundreds of years. And we have, there's clearly a problem. We see this in the police killings today. If you doubt that, we have history of lynchings in the South in recent enough times that there are photographs of people at picnics while attending a lynching and having a picnic. There's photographs of this. And yet I have not committed a crime solely by the virtue of my white skin. Our society has committed a great crime, and I am part of the white society that has committed this crime, and that is the crime of oppressing blacks and taking them as slaves. But a white person is not guilty because they are white. The society itself is guilty, and the white person is part of that society. And there's a burden on that society and on everyone in that society, particularly the white majority, to make it right as best we can. We have brought people here against their will. They are now here. They have desperate situations, many of them. What are we going to do about it? We have a responsibility to do something about that. Maybe it's Ta-Nehisi Coates reparations. I don't think that's out of line at all. These are the responsibilities we have. But let me say this. As I read that email, I did not read the whole thing. I, out of duty, read most of it. I was not persuaded. And I'm on the side of the protesters. How would someone react who wasn't? How would they be persuaded by that sort of thing? I can certainly see how people will be coerced by HR training. Some might say that we don't have to persuade because we can coerce. That's true. I believe that is possible. And I'm going to tell you why that doesn't work. Yes, you can coerce, you can get outward conformity, but to change the core problem, which is the heart. Consider Stieg Larsson's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That now I get back to my literary angle here. If you've read those books, and I encourage you to read the books. I have not seen the films, nor do I really wish to, but the books are where it's at, in my opinion, and they are astounding in the story they tell and in the picture they paint. And I think what's lost on an American audience is that the very fact that these events occur in Sweden, a country that is so progressive and has implemented so many of these what we would consider politically correct or woke or progressive ideas about the role of women, about the treatment of people equally. This society on paper is the utopia that maybe we would try to build here. And yet, as you read these books, you see that's not really what it's like. They still have great problems with women being abused in many horrible ways. There are rings of prostitution brought in from the Eastern Bloc run by criminals. There must be obviously some customers for these prostitutes. And not only that, to gain some idea of the lengths they have gone to wipe out this kind of thing, which is very oppressive to women. There's a character in the story who is a somewhat corrupt police officer, and when it's discovered that he has visited a prostitute, he loses his retirement. And so, can you imagine if we did something like that here? I just, I don't think that would ever pass. And the thing is, they have done things like that in Sweden, and yet they have not solved this problem of the human heart, or perhaps of even things in the human makeup that are not necessarily bad, but that need to be worked through. The tribalism that we all demonstrate. These are things that if we suppress thought, we do not really solve the problem. You are suppressing thought, but not secret thought. And so there are some things where we do need to coerce. When a policeman kills an innocent person, unarmed, no threat to the policeman, that policeman needs to be prosecuted for murder. And that will be a coercive effect on others that might try something like this. They would be less likely to try it if they know they could be sentenced for murder. That is coercion in a good way, and it needs to be done. But you cannot coerce the inner lives of everyone in every workplace. You cannot successfully do this and actually have a good effect And that's what I fear will happen. We will try to do this. We will implement a system such as Sweden, and we won't have solved anything. And in America, especially, I believe that will make the problem worse. I think the only solution to this is to interact with each other in our diverse groups that are so far in different worlds from each other. There needs to be some sort of contact, and it is through that contact and interaction that this problem will be solved. Thanks for watching. If you like this, please click like and please subscribe. I'll see you next time.